All right. Let's reset and start Epoch 2. And we have the honor to have with us Michael Madoff from IOG. And he's going to talk to us a bit about the DRep Pioneer program. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
DRep Pioneer program.
Go ahead.
So, first of all, thank you everyone for the warm welcome in the Nordic Cardano community, and thanks Thomas and myself for organizing this this great event. My name is Michael Madoff. I'm the group product manager for Voltaire at IOG, which means I primarily work on governance. And so, just to zoom all the way out for a little bit, what are we talking about when we talk about Voltaire? Some of you may be familiar with the initial Cardano roadmap. And so Voltaire is the last stage in the Cardano roadmap where everything around governance is happening. And so that's kind of my remit within IOG. There are three pillars of the Cardano governance system and the way we're approaching it. The first pillar is around institutions. We know institutions are critical to good governance, and you may have heard about a member-based organization called Intersect that launched recently, which is our first attempt at creating an institutional structure for governance to take place. The second pillar is the Cardano Constitution, which is something we're going to be developing over the course of the next year, which is a document with a shared set of values and rules to safeguard the blockchain itself. And then finally, what I want to focus on today is this third pillar around technology. So you've probably heard about SIP 1694 and the role that DReps play within SIP 1694. And there are two subtopics that I think have come up today that I really want to focus on within that third pillar around technology. So the first topic is around education and how do we educate DReps once we have developed this code of conduct, how do we get it out there in the world? And one thing that the Intersect team is working on is what we're calling a DRep Pioneer program. You may have heard before about Plutus Pioneers or other Pioneer programs that IOG has set up. But the idea here is to have a structured educational series of workshops in order to train the cohort of DReps that we're developing. So just to give an overview of the program, and you're I think the first ones seeing some of this publicly, so very exciting. So the objective of the program is to have a training course that's delivered by Intersect. We're planning to have 2 workshops that are going to focus on 8 different topics. So what we've already talked about today, what is the role of the DRep? What is the code of conduct for DReps? So again, critical, the input from this workshop. Why delegation and liquid democracy, how to become a DRep, which I'm going to show you the tooling and technology side of later. What is the rewards and incentive scheme for DReps? Something we talked about, why would you want to become a DRep? Are you going to get paid? How is that going to work? How to put yourself forward as a DRep and thinking of DReps as kind of the politicians of the Cardano ecosystem. How do you campaign for delegation, attract votes, and represent your constituents? And be thinking about, finally, the broader view of the future of Cardano governance. So the way we want to do this is to have a more intensive and targeted program, starting with 20 community members, roughly, who are interested in becoming DReps, and having 2 in-depth workshops with those individuals, and then training those individuals to train the rest of the community through their own structured workshop format. So it's kind of a train-the-trainer model. You start with a core, get them to become experts, and then have the distribution flow out from there. So roughly, we're hoping to have the first workshop organized in February, sometime towards the end of next month, and the second one towards the end of March. And so by the end of that program, and in time for the hard fork, which will implement 1694, we'll have a core of DReps that have been trained and are familiar with how to operate the system from both a technical perspective, but also how to be good governance participants. And so that's an overview of the educational side of things, but I also, since this topic came up in the discussion, wanted to show you from a tooling perspective as well where things stand. So I know there was a question raised about, do we have a kind of light interface? How do I register as a DRep? Do I have to know command line? The answer is no. You can, in a matter of clicks, go to sancho.gov.tools, connect, I think we have 5 wallets available. So I think I promised 3 clicks, it might be 4, but 1, register as a DRep. You have the option to add information about yourself if you want to. And then, okay, if I had it in this test wallet, you would be registered as a DRep. And so it's actually a very simple process through to the end. And then from here, you can view the governance actions that are available on SanchoNet, such as changes to the Constitution, implementing a new hard fork, changes to the protocol parameters, and we actually have a very active community already on here testing, playing the role of different governance actors and DReps in particular. So it's already there, and then when the system goes live on mainnet, it'll be the same tool set that also goes live at the same time. So it's the same user interface and experience, but we're going to have lots of practice and testing having been done on that system before.
Can you currently filter in Gov2 when it's many governance sections?
Yeah, so there is a filter. So you can filter by type of governance action, and you can sort by things like how soon is this governance action going to expire, what has the highest amount of votes so far. But again, I'm doing the product management, so would love to hear your feedback if you get a chance to log on and test this sometime if the interface makes sense to you.
Can you the current state of voting for these?
You can. So if you go into the proposal details, so I think there was a really interesting one that happened a couple of weeks ago, Nico, where we had a constitutional committee and we did a little fire drill of what would it mean to overthrow the constitutional committee, and what does that look like. So a group of people, Mike Hornan organized a little coup and had a peaceful transfer of power after securing enough votes. So yes, exactly. So you could zoom into a particular governance action, see when it was submitted, by whom, when it will expire, a description of what the details and the impact of that governance action might be, and how many votes have been cast for it.
Shouldn't there be like a pie chart and like a volume meter or something on the ticket summaries themselves? So
Love it.
See it at a glance.
There should.
Just about feedback, because I really like the Gov role, right? And I know right now we do not have the real thresholds yet for the different governance action thresholds on when they get approved. Right? It could be useful to see when something would meet the threshold here.
Yeah.
But then again, now that I say it, it could also suggest to people what they should vote for, right? Because if you have a vote already and you see yes is leading by 80% or something, I don't know, it's some sort of...
It might influence, you know, and inevitably the design of the system is going to influence the behavior that you see on it, and we have to be careful about that. But I think, yeah, that's a good point.
I'm just going to ask the details about of the governance action there. If it's going to be easy for anyone to understand it, is the details going to be like that?
No. So this is just some sample data that someone has put in, but ideally the detail would be a narrative that you write. Why is this action justified? I need this money from the Treasury to fund this project. We should change this parameter because it's more beneficial to stake pools, and this is why you should vote for my proposal.
There should be pros and cons, I think. The trades
Sorry,
are-
pros I meant as in not code, but
Yeah.
plain text.
Yeah, but it's like, not always it's just why you should vote, but also what's the consequence of the voting is for it. So you're getting to view both sides of it. It's not just that.
I think that's a good point. It shouldn't just be the story that is written by the proposer, but it should also be this is what is actually going to be executed. Because someone could lie and say, oh yeah, you know,
Yeah.
this is a proposal to not change anything, and then you see at the executable, it's like, okay, drain treasury.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think this gets back also into the training aspect of it, right? As a DRep, if I'm putting forward a proposal, if I'm voting on a proposal, I should explain the impact of the proposal that I'm voting for and why.
So it should be
Positive and negative.
a blank field that people maybe could fill out.
Yeah.
And put in that I think if you do this, this is going to happen.
Yeah, there should be some community review.
Or
Before
a link to a forum.
voting, right? Yeah.
One thing to add on that, is this pulled from the voting anchor data, and does it show
Yes.
changes? Because if you say one thing and then change it,
It
just
is hashed, so
It's hashed.
you cannot change it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is there when you're looking at a specific proposal, is there a way to, are there forums to discuss this, or are you sort of expecting people to just take to Twitter or Reddit or?
Yeah, so I think that was a point, maybe Nico, you raised this. So we are working on a simple discussion forum that's going to be an add-on to this tool, where there's an off-chain process for discussion before the actual on-chain voting happens, and that's going to be kind of that place for more robust debate, and I think we can add in the functionality to do polling, for example, before you go to the official on-chain vote. Do you want to do a soft temperature check of your proposal and see if it's popular enough to gain support?
I think it's also really important to mention, right, that a lot of the discussions for voting will happen off-chain before anything is even remotely on.
Right.
At least.
It should. Yeah.
Code
Ideal.
of conduct. Should ideally.
Right.
Fantastic.
But would that also be like, say, the specialists that review this edit of code, say, for example, they don't want it on chain, can they stop it already there, or can it be proposed regardless?
So in SIP 1694, anyone can put a proposal on chain. There's nothing you can do to stop them from proposing it. But if there's a technical consensus that it's not a good proposal, you would hope it would be voted down. And I think as I was pointing out as well, that's also the purpose of the Constitution, right? To provide certain guardrails up to the point where if something is a really bad proposal that would cause the blockchain to cease to function, can you actually have an automated script that prevents that from happening?
Yeah, I'm just thinking when I see pages of pages with code, if it's one line you would change and everything else looks good, and then suddenly this slip through the safety net that's put in place.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's why you need a combination of human intervention and code checks, right? But it's a problem with real-world governance systems as well, right? Someone proposes a really long bill and slips something in there for their own.
But I think instead of having a separate platform, it should be possible to review it and add comments to it. Say the DRep's because there are DReps with high technical knowledge and there's DReps without any technical knowledge. So maybe one DRep notice something and we can put it up there so you can see the reviews of the other DReps as well.
But isn't this the same as the list? I mean, there are people doing reviews of the technical proposals, and that's the same that should take place here as well.
Yeah.
And I do think, especially for stuff like protocol parameters, it might be a good idea to have the actual experts weigh in on things, not to sway the vote necessarily, but to provide their feedback. Because something that might be attractive for people to vote for is, okay, we want to quadruple the transaction or block size. But then, for the SPOs, that's going to suck, right?
Right.
And it may actually impact the propagation of information to the network. So even though you're not setting the block size to 0 and trying to wreck the chain, you're effectively wrecking the chain by preventing this sort of propagation period, right?
Yep.
Or Peras might fail, or some other thing might crash because of this proposed change.
Yeah, I mean, I think even more interesting is there are proposals that are going to have a positive impact on some stakeholders and a negative impact on other stakeholders, and how do you mediate between them and try to make a decision about what the outcome is. Yeah, I think for things that are obviously bad, it's kind of clear cut what you want to prevent from happening, but when you're designing a governance system, inevitably there's going to be trade-offs between different parties that you have to think about.
Yeah, and like for example, mandating SPOs to run Mithra, for example, and then increasing what you're actually sort of signing off on in Mithra is going to increase operational costs for SPOs, and sort of the hardware requirements and everything, which might be a good thing because the network actually improves, but it might be a bad thing for that guy running 4 Raspberry Pis, right? But is that a valid concern for the network, or is that a sacrifice that is okay to make?
Yeah.
It's, I think getting input from the people that have built these things or worked on this, not to necessarily sway the vote, but just literally just to explain what will the consequence be.
Yeah.
Could be useful.
So I think that's a good segue back into what it means to be a DRep, right? What does it mean to develop a governing class that is capable of making those mature decisions and trade-offs, right? And so just to preview a little bit of the curriculum during the workshop, we're going to try to answer exactly questions like this. Like, what does it mean to be a DRep? Are you representing only your constituents? Are you only responsible for a certain technical area? How are you meant to behave according to the code of conduct? And so what we're going to do is teach people, I guess, first just the basics. What is all the terminology? I think someone was asking if we have a definition somewhere of what is a DRep and what is a delegator, and making sure everyone's on the same page about the terminology. The metadata aspect that you alluded to, so this justification of why a governance action is being proposed or why a vote is being taken. How do we represent that on-chain and link to that on-chain in such a way that it can't be tampered with securely? And then I think someone also asked about SIP30, SIP95, what are the wallet connector standards into the tool that will allow this to happen? Getting into the role of the DRep. Thomas, how am I doing on time? I can speed up, slow down, whatever is needed. Okay, great. Right, so talking about what is your responsibility as a DRep, as an elected representative, and I think this came up in the Miro board that we were just doing as well. What is your responsibility to your constituents versus to yourself? What is your expectations, right? You're meant to be a leader of the community. You're meant to provide transparency, but at least what is kind of the minimum ask to participate in this liquid democracy system? this is where we're going to insert all the content that we've developed in this workshop today, but just taken from the first page. What is the DRep code of conduct? Making sure everyone understands what they're signing up for.
No pressure.
Explaining liquid democracy and delegation. And then this is what I wanted to spend at least a minute on, because I think it's a really interesting question that's come up. How do we incentivize DReps properly, and thinking about the unintended consequences of different reward schemes, right? So I think someone touched on, why don't we reward people every time they vote? Well, then I'm just going to vote randomly 1,000,000 times so I can get as many rewards as I want, right? So what our research team at IOG came up with, there's a game theory scholar at the University of Edinburgh called Philip Blazos, who came up with this framework of DRep rewards. And basically we have 3 options that we've narrowed it down to as possible suggestions, and of course this will be open to the community to figure out. But you could have rewards that are split equally among a top set of DReps by delegation. So let's say the top 100 DReps by delegation are considered included in the set, and you have a pot of money that's split evenly between them. So that creates an incentive to campaign. It creates a scenario where if you're really making this your work and you're professionally compensated for it and you're taking it seriously and you're successful, this is actually something you can make a living doing potentially. There is a scheme where it's proportional to delegation, right? So the more delegation you get, the more rewards you receive. We have to think about what are the trade-offs of concentration of power and maybe discouraging that centralization of power depending on how those proportions are made up. And then we've also talked about different bonus schemes and budgets. So you could say some combination of those 2 models, right, where it's among the top 100 DReps, that if you're in the top 10, you get a certain bonus pool. If you're in the next 50, you get a different bonus pool. And it's all about calibrating what incentives and competition we want among these individuals. And I think there's no right answer. Every system is going to have trade-offs in different directions, and it's something we're just going to have to work through and see.
Yeah, I think there's going to be trade-offs, but for me it's important we don't create barrier of entry to someone coming in and trying to see if they can be a DRep, because we want a talent pool that's growing over time. If not, I worry we'll stagnate. So
Yeah.
It's going to be a very interesting debate for sure. But I fully understand, like, any of these models will, and I saw some of this research, it will create trade-offs as well. So the proportional one have more danger in centralization, as you pointed out. So,
I think something that's super important with this as well is how actively are people actually participating in changing their delegation. What is the cost barrier for people to do this, and how accessible is it? So if they can do it within their wallet and it costs, even if it costs everyone 1 ADA, it's like, okay, are you really going to do that, every 5 days? Probably not. So you're gonna have this retention, right, of delegation, even though people might actually just either not participate or they might, do whatever. So it's important to, I think something like that could make it harder for new people to come in that are actually participating, actually engaging, actually doing stuff to attract this sort of sticky delegation. Because people just, they go in once.
Don't change bank accounts.
Exactly.
You don't change the DRep.
Yeah.
You go in once, you're like, oh yeah, I know that guy, so you delegate to him, and
Set
then
it and
that's
forget
the
it.
rest of it.
And it's something we've seen in the stake pool model even, right? Like there are people who are delegated to pools that don't exist anymore, and they're losing thousands, and they don't even bother to realize it, right? So,
and in Catalyst, people just search for a name, and they just vote for all of their proposals, regardless of merit, regardless of other existing proposals that might also be worthy. It's like, okay, I know that guy, so I'll just vote for his stuff.
Yeah.
And there is, you know, potential of abuse for stuff like that as well, where, you know, okay, I'll attach my name to it if you, you know, even if it's not my proposal, if you pay me something or something, like, you know, it's important to keep these incentive structures that you're creating, even unintentionally, in mind.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, I guess you said it as
That's-
well, but I
it's-
mean, so what's the rationale behind using the top, the word top?
Yeah.
I would agree to a lot of that if you just deleted the word top DRep.
Yeah, so-
Those with most delegators, I assume, but why do you care about that at all? Why not
So
create it?
part of it is to constrain the budget, right? The treasury expenditure on,
But the same amount just
participant.
divided and split and shared among more DReps.
Or make tires.
right, so
Five
that's another
tires, for
idea, have a
example.
tiered system. So I would say, I guess from a philosophical level, I don't know if we even begin with the assumption that more DReps results in better quality governance, right? Like if I were to take Norway, for example, is it a better government if every single person in the country is a member of parliament? Do you want to maximize the number of people that are in parliament, or do you want to maximize the quality of the governance outcomes that result from the design of the system? And I don't know the answer necessarily, but you can see why you might want to have a variable that you can set.
But I think perhaps a better metric or there are better metrics to measure than delegation. And in particular, participation in terms of, okay, you're providing good rationales, they are getting good reviews, or
Who's measuring that?
delegation differentials. So, okay, you don't have a lot of delegation, but you're gaining a lot of delegation. So you're a top 2 gainer, for example, instead of a top 2 have, you know, delegated.
Because somehow, if you're not
Cannot
super enthusiastic, it takes time to
Keep
get along.
making you bullshit.
Sure,
Those
so you
top
probably
and
have to
bottom DReps.
balance it against
And
something
if
else.
large
I
way
agree.
to go,
But
then you use.
the good thing about that, it just
Yeah.
inherently prevents stickiness.
Specifically, if people are just stick with one their first delegated to in the first place, right? It's
Yeah.
really hard to get among those top 100.
Yeah.
Sounds like we have a good discussion to have on this.
I think, and I think we'll spend many of the coming months talking about this and the various trade-offs. But I think Ben, good.
It's all boiling down to the voting. If you say 1 ADA is 1 vote, then the people with the most money will always win. This doesn't matter if not the voting itself is fair. That's why when you had the online workshop, I said that the voting has to be a floating point. So if you're over something, you have to the voting has to not count as much.
The diminishing returns on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because if a pool has more than 64 million ADA, then it just suffers, right? So somehow.
It doesn't matter.
Yes, it should be a saturation.
You can comment what you like, but the voting is the main thing. Because you can't vote on the vote on the vote. You just discuss and vote the discussion. Because the voting itself is the main problem.
And an incentive structure that, again, then favors Wales even more,
Yeah.
right? That's, I would say, a bit unfair. That's why I'm personally against any rewards for DReps or voters.
That's another
Then
option.
again, this is also